Something I teach all of my sales reps, and I've been teaching throughout my 20+ year career, has been the DISC method. So I'm big on the psychology of the sale. I'm big on why do people make the decisions that they make. That's been something that since I got into sales, was just really interesting to me, and I couldn't read enough books about it. Now I'm an NLP certified coach, and NLP to me is kind of the big leagues of the unconscious mind. But before I did any of that, I really leaned into what's called the DISC method. The DISC method is a personality profile or a test that you can take to find out, well, what's my DISC profile? And that is something you're really going to want to do, or at least start with, is start by taking a DISC test that you can find out, okay, what's my score? Am I going to be a high D, a high I, a high S, or a high C, or maybe a high D and a high I? It breaks down into that acronym, D-I-S-C, and it could be dominant or driver. Influence, S is typically steady or systems, and C is going to be conscientious or cautious. They all mean the same things in respect to the profile or the personality type that they're talking about. High D people are going to be dominant, they're going to be competitive, they're going to be risk takers. They might come off as a bit of an asshole. I don't know how else to say it, depending on who you're talking to. Very confident. High I's are going to be big energy, super emotionally driven. They're influence types, right? They're the guys that everybody wants to be around, right? Real high energy, real boisterous, just natural people. Your high S, those folks crave systems or stability, right? They're your 9-to-5 type folk. They want and crave systems. And then you have your high C, that's going to be your engineer, or the polar opposite of anybody that's a salesperson, because they're going to be logic driven. They're going to be numbers, ones and zeros, and they've got to see how everything works. They've got to know how everything works. They've got to know all the ins and the outs of all the things. And honestly, they're usually the biggest pain in the butt to any natural salesperson. But if you know that that's how it is, right? It's like boxing in a ring and being blindfolded, right? Learning more about, at least if you're in the ring and you can take the blindfold off, you can punch back. So in this instance, the more I learn about how to sell someone, or the psychology of a sell, or how that person sitting across from me thinks, and understanding that everyone gets to decisions differently, that helps me take that blindfold off and I have a puncher's chance. Make sense? So let's focus on this DISC method and understanding first what my DISC profile is, because if I know my DISC profile, which by the way, I'm a 99D and a 99I, and I'm a low S and a low C. If I know that, then I can curtail and curb my natural DISC profile habits to appeal better to someone who's a high S or a high C. Or I know, okay, I'm sitting here with someone who's a high C, and while I might make decisions based on emotion, or if I like someone, or I'm confident in my decision-making capabilities, I know that I'm sitting across from somebody who's a high C, so I need to break this thing down to the absolute ridiculous to them, put it on paper, show them how everything works, make sure I cover every freaking angle, cross every T, dot every I. Overkill when it comes to having them understand anything and everything, and especially when it comes to numbers, because if I try to sell them the way I would want to be sold, or the way I would want to buy something, because everybody wants to buy stuff, no one wants to be sold. If I try to sell to them the way I would want to buy something, it's just not going to work, because it's not the way they make decisions. So understanding that everyone reaches decisions in a different way is the first step to a successful salesperson. Let's do some examples of D to I, S to C, things like that. Starting with probably the most difficult, high I versus high C. All right, so a high I versus a high C could not be more polar opposite when it comes to a DISC profile. A high I is somebody who's super personable, and if you're a salesperson, if you're sitting in the house of somebody, chances are you're probably a high I and a high D. The high I is excellent for salespeople because often, again, that's that big energy. That's what makes you a likable person. The high D is the confidence and competitiveness to make you a one-call closer. So it's kind of like the I is necessary for you to be in sales. The D is necessary for you to be a closer. You put the two together and you've got an absolute shark. Does that make sense? All right, so let's talk high I to high C. I looked up my notes here and I remember writing this, but basically you're asking someone who thrives on emotion, enthusiasm, and spontaneity, or the high I, to sell to somebody who is complete and utter logic. They are structure, they're control, simple, but it can be done strategically. Now, here's how I would approach this. The high C, the engineer, know thy customer. So before we build the approach, we've really got to break down who they are as a high C individual. Or in this example, let's focus on the engineer, because that's everybody's biggest pain in the ass, right? So let's focus on the high C, or in this case, let's focus on selling to the engineer. So a high C needs to feel safe and get to a yes. So for them to get to a yes, there's a few things that they're going to need. They have a logical thought process. They want minimal risk. They are data, specs, and charts. Remember that. They want the autonomy to analyze. You need to give them the autonomy to analyze and break things down, to do math. Never hover over them. Let them break this down. You can help them get to a conclusion, but if you're a true sales pro, you're always going to ask to excuse yourself anyhow when they're really breaking things down. I'm going to help get them to the finish line, but if they're doing math or they're analyzing things, let them do that. Go step outside, make some phone calls, tell them to wave you in when you're ready. Here are some things to avoid when selling to an engineer or a high C, especially if you're a high I. No fluff, no pressure. Now, you can take pressure off, or at least the illusion of a lack of pressure, but you've got to do it in a way that is believable while still creating urgency. That is the true sales pro. I could be a today and today only scenario, but I'm not going to deliver it like that, if that makes sense. My offer is going to be contingent on urgency, but it's going to be a logic-driven urgency. It's got to make sense and it's got to be believable. And I have to say it in a tone. My body language and tone have to express that I'm not really trying to press you. I don't even care. But the fact is, in order to do this at this price, it has to be made within this window, whether that's today or the next 24 hours. That simply is the scenario that we find ourselves in. I'm okay with whatever decision you come to, but for this to be this, it has to be during this time frame. And lastly, they do not like to be surprised. So no fluff, no surprises, and no high pressure. So let's break down how the high I, big emotions, big energy, should adapt to a high C. All right, so first we need to dial down the charm and dial up the facts. You had better know what you're talking about. So instead of focusing on the stories, the emotion, the typical things that we're going to try to drive rapport, stories, connection, emotion, jokes, definitely stay away from the jokes because I've had plenty of those not land. Focus more on, walk in with a binder full of information. Have your tablet and breakdown of specs and have that ready for any high C. Testimonials from other folks, especially engineers, would be excellent, right? If you have an engineer that you are able to sell, which you will over your course of your professional career, get some testimony from those folks. So go, hey, here's, by the way, this is another fellow engineer, right? That'll make them feel a lot safer. That other person, they'll know if they're an engineer, they've done their due diligence. And that's just a little trick that I added that really helped me along the way. And lastly, have a clear agenda. So listen, you could say something like, hey, name, I've prepped a quick breakdown of the product, all the specs, performance, return on investment, cost versus value report if it's a roof, for example. Hey Steve, listen, I've prepped a breakdown, all the specs on all of the products, not just the shingle itself, but all of the underlayment versus other competitors and other brands. Here are the specs, here how it all holds up, here how it holds up over time, here's the expected ROI, cost versus value, anything that you can think of that might be pertinent to the sale, and you really need to try to put yourself in the mind of an engineer. Every piece of possible data you can possibly bring to the table, bring it to the table and come equipped with it. And then literally say something like this: I thought you might want to walk through the logic of the system together. This disarms them completely and quickly because you're speaking their language. If you're me, I want to go right in and I want to turn on the charm. I want to shake hands and kiss babies. I want to make jokes. I want to have fun because I'm a big energy guy. I'm a 99D. I'm a 99I, man. Let's get in here and let's hang out. I'm moving in. That's not going to work on them. In fact, that's going to push them way back, right? I'm a facts tell, story sell kind of guy. I've got a story for everything, but I've got to turn that down when it comes to them, and it's got to be all facts, logic, data, specs. Why is this a good buy? So then you can kind of literally, step 2, translate the enthusiasm into structure. So use flowcharts, use graphs and process, use flowcharts, use graphs and process diagrams. Use phrases like, let's walk through this system step by step, especially like if it's a roof. All right, let's walk through this roofing system step by step. Here's the underlying logic behind this roofing system. This was engineered to minimize error rates by 33%. This was engineered engineered to last 50 years with a matched 25-year workmanship warranty. This was engineered to uphold 160 mile per hour winds. Let me show you how this compares spec to spec to the alternative or the alternative. Let them interrupt. Let them scrutinize. That's how a high C shows interest. Remember, they're introverted, so they're not super talkative. So if you get them talking, interrupting, showing interest, which again, comparing notes, interrupting, asking questions, that's all key indicators that they're interested. Number 3, objections. Respect the analysis process. You will get objections like, I need time to go over this again. That's probably the biggest one you're gonna get. I need time to go over this again. I wanna run this by a colleague. I don't get that one as much, but you might get that. I'm not convinced this warranty is sufficient. Again, maybe. I think the number one thing you're gonna get is the first one I said. Do not push or say, trust me. Instead, say something like this. I totally understand. Look, I'd wanna analyze every angle too. Here's a one-page technical summary that we can go over and share. Offer control, offer logic, offer backup. Here, when I'm providing that one-page summary, is kind of setting up one really old school closing technique that I use a lot for engineers. Step 4, the close. Frame the decision as a risk-managed logic. Avoid emotional appeals like, this is a once-in-a-lifetime deal, or I can only do this price today. Like I said, even if you're a one-call closer, do not say that. It's more about believable drops and logic. So if you have the ability to drop price by offering something like a flex discount if they're willing to be a flex spot in your schedule, or a marketing discount, depending on where you're at. If you guys are looking for marketing homes, or you offer discounts for marketing homes in areas, whatever your company has allowed you to offer, it better make sense and it better be believable. It's got to be a give and take scenario. It can't just be an arbitrary price drop, but you wouldn't do that anyhow, because if you did that with anybody, you would lose instant credibility. But with an engineer, it really has to be believable and time conscious. So instead, you're going to want to say something like this. Based on what you've told me, this roof here meets all of your performance requirements, right? And the life cycle and return on investment is stronger than anything else in its class. The data supports the value. You could spend another 2 weeks analyzing, and I respect that, but the numbers won't change. When you're ready, the next step is simple. We'll document everything in writing so you have complete clarity before continuing. You're giving them a logical path forward, not a push. Now, I'm going to be still on that one call close or initial visit process. So for me, I like transitioning from that to a T close. And I know that's super old school. And the way I usually divulge my T close is if it's a husband and wife or an engineer couple, I might say, hey, is there something that I could present to you all that my wife and I use? You know, I'm not really the engineer type, but she is. She's an attorney. And this helps us when we make major decisions like this. Now, guys, again, you can analyze this over and over, and I will encourage you, analyze the data. But as I said, the numbers aren't going to change. In fact, if you're analyzing this for a couple weeks or even a month with the market volatility that we're currently dealing with, guys, it's hard enough for us to hold something, 30 days, much less a year. The reality is in order to hold this for a year, the company would have to anticipate several price increases and increase the price significantly just to cover their butt. Same holds true for 30 days. The most aggressive price point that I can possibly offer you is while I'm sitting with you, it doesn't cost us to send me back out. The most cost aggressive it's ever going to be with the company is right here, right now. And that might not be, but a few $1,000s, but a few $1,000 adds up, right? And so I'm here right now. I'm able to answer any and all of your questions. Why don't you go over the data? Let's take a look at this process that my wife and I use. It's called Ben Franklin T. Back when Ben Franklin and his wife were still alive. This is something that they use to make major decisions, and it's very simple. And I would just do a literal T graph on a piece of paper, flip it over to them with a yes or a no or a pros or cons, because that's really is. It's a pros or cons list or a yes or no column. And I'm gonna list everything out, right? Specs, underlayment for a roof, warranty, everything I can possibly think of to overload, anything I can break down and make it just absolutely ridiculous, all the way down to the price point, the monthly payment, like I said, the warranty, the return on investment, the cost versus value report, the underlayment. I wanna make sure that there is no question on product, warranty, company. Everything needs to be yes, 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 especially as it upholds to its competitors, and they have to see that on paper. So I would literally go through, okay, as far as the warranty is concerned, the fact that it's 50 years, would you say that's sufficient? The fact that it's transferable, does that meet your needs? Yes. And I'm gonna go through and ask them every one of these questions and make sure that it meets or exceeds their needs or stands up against the competitors. so we can get all of these yeses or checks in the column that is yes or a pro, and then as many no's or lack thereof in the no columns. Usually that's going to be price, maybe urgency or time contingent, but still, if that's all it is, then it tells me my objection is price, and I might be able to help them with a discount in-house today and get them at least right then and there versus having to come back. But ultimately, it's the logic that's going to help support this decision. So I have to show them on paper and then break down to the ridiculous, like guys, if I'm able to get them to say a price, and I can then break that down over financing, really have done all of my prerequisites like a customer needs analysis and done my job to make sure that I know what that price point is in terms of their monthly investment if they're looking to finance. It's got to be logic driven. Like, well, look, logically you told me that you're looking to be around a $250 price point per month. I've actually got you just underneath of that. So I've been able to meet the standard that you set in terms of your monthly investment. As far as overall pricing goes, if we were able to defer this for you, or if we were able to get this a little bit more aggressive for you, or if we were able to meet your needs or make this make more sense, right? If I were to reverse this down to what it is a day for the cost of a cup of coffee a day, you're able to remove one of the most annoying projects that a homeowner has to make or do for their home, like a roof. It's not fun, but it's an absolute imperative piece to the puzzle because you're literally covering everything that's valuable to you. We're helping to remove the stress of getting that done right. As you guys can see here, it meets all of your needs. Logically, this roof makes sense, but it has to make sense to you in your pocketbook. It also does meet where you had given me to be as far as your monthly budget, or helps even exceed or even beats your monthly budget that you set for me. So if I'm able to show them all of these things on paper, breaking it down and make it logically make sense, that's my best path forward. And then I excuse myself while they're making a decision. Guys, I don't want to hover over you. Here's all of the information. I provided them all the information, all of it. And I really need to end with an urgency piece, which is like, listen, we can hold this, but the numbers aren't going to change. If anything, the only risk is that they go up. Perhaps you're allowed to hold a price for a week or two. But the reality is if I'm offering a slight discount on initial visit, and that's believable, because frankly, it's believable to offer a slight discount if it doesn't cost for me if it costs for me to have to come back over and over, then of course there's going to be a slight discount for me being here, right now. I can show them that, but it's got to make sense. It can't be anything crazy. And if it does, and you've done your job right, and you've given them all of the data and have them come to that conclusion, you've just supported that decision-making process with all of the facts and put it all in writing, and just support that this does in fact make all sense in the world. You can kind of help that overarching feel of like, I just cannot compute making a decision right here and right there because it just feels foreign to me. If you can help them navigate that and just completely make it based on logic, you have a shot at closing that engineer, because you've answered any and all of their questions. You've satisfied their need for logic. You've satisfied their need to see everything in writing, every number and every possible scenario. That is your best shot. And I've had plenty that I've been able to do business with on the initial visit. But again, you've got to be able to come to terms with that they're going to do it way differently than you were if you're a natural salesperson.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up, it's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend.